Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning to Not Your Journey to Take. Early morning sip and chat. It is the beginning of the second week of January in 2023. How are you? How are you getting your year started? So, on last week, we talked a lot about setting a boundary as a goal, setting at least one boundary as a goal. Right? I don't want you to take up all of your goals using them as boundaries. But I'm hoping that you do have some goals. And I'm hoping that you took at least one goal and set that as a boundary. We start by taking small steps, getting comfortable, and then we can take larger steps. So, question for you. On last week, did you use one of your goals and set it as a boundary? If so, share in the comments. If you're watching me live or watching a replay, you can add it in the comments or you can send me a DM if you feel more comfortable. But on last week, did we set at least one boundary as a goal? I'm praying and hoping that you did. So on this week, what we need to do is implement that. Make sure that we're figuring out how to implement that boundary. It's not always easy, right? It's not always as simple as it sounds. But once you begin to do it, right, becoming repetitive with it, it gets easier. It truly does. So last week, we were setting the boundaries as a goal. Now it's time to implement them if you haven't already. And just to begin, taking small steps to implement them. And your boundary could be anything. I'm not sure what's happening in your life or what's going on in your life. I'm not sure how you interact with people or not. But I will say, everyone needs boundaries. You should be having boundaries to give to people. You should also be receiving other folks' boundaries and respect them. It's a mutual respect. Good morning. It is a mutual respect. Just understand that, right? So this week, let's begin to implement those boundaries, right? And if you're not sure or not comfortable with that, with establishing those boundaries, right? If you're not comfortable with putting it out there, if you're not comfortable with doing that, we've set them. Now we got to try to put them into our everyday lives. So if you're not comfortable with doing it just yet, take baby steps. So say one of your boundaries you set, and I'm just giving an example. Say, I don't know, say your child can walk to school or catch the school bus to school. And they ask you every morning, Ma, could you take me to school? Ma, can you drop me off? Ma, can you? Well, if you don't want to do that, and you want him or her to get used to being independent instead of depending on you to drop them off, if there are alternatives, let's say that, and the alternative could be to walk to school, and say that there isn't any kind of inclement weather it's perfect outside, right? Or they can catch the bus, and the walk to the bus stop is not that far, and the weather isn't bad. Tell them no. Catch the bus to school or walk to school. Let them know it's not. If you want to give a reason, there isn't any kind of inclement weather. So go ahead and walk to school and I'll see you this evening. That's a boundary that you can set. And in that boundary, you can have an explanation and a conversation with your child to say, hey, if it's not any type of inclement weather, you will be walking to school or you will be catching the bus. A boundary is as simple. It's just kind of setting some ground rules about what you will and won't do. It's really simple. It's just that the person that's receiving it may not like it. They may feel like, oh, wow, you don't want to do this for me anymore? You don't want to do that for me anymore? Good morning. And it's not that you can't do it, but why should you if you don't want to? That's where boundaries come into play. If it's not something that you want to do and you can't do it out of love and kindness, then don't do it. Don't do it. Because there are times we get overwhelmed for being there for everyone, showing up for everyone, being present for everyone, and missing the mark by being present with ourselves. So that example was just a really simple example of setting a boundary. So that way your children will say, well, it's not raining, it's not snowing, it's not super cold, it's not any really bad weather that's happening. So I know mommy's not going to take them to school today. Let me leave in time so that if I'm walking, I can get to school on time. And if I'm catching the bus, I can get to the bus stop on time. And that's going to take some practice, especially if you are always taking them, always dropping them off, knowing that there were alternatives. So that's just a sample of a boundary that you can set. And again, it's going to take a little while because your children are going to have to get used to that, especially if they haven't had to. Right? That's just a boundary. But if somebody is asking you to do something that you really don't want to do, you're not comfortable with doing, or you don't like doing, say no. Say no. Say no. And for me, again, I'm Keisha Mason Campbell, the author of Not Your Journey to Take. And I teach women that no is a complete sentence. And I show them how to establish healthy boundaries with their families while putting their needs first. And that's something that we don't do. That is something that we absolutely don't do. We take care of everybody else, and then we're running on fumes when it comes to taking care of ourselves. And that's not healthy. Right? As a healthy person, you can take care of somebody else in a healthy space and teach them how to take care of themselves. A lot of times we teach lessons without even talking. We teach lessons by showing. So if you're showing your kids how to be independent, how to be self-sufficient, that it's okay to walk to school if the school is in walking distance. It's okay to catch the bus to school because they provide a bus for you. Me dropping you off at school is a privilege, and I won't do it every day. And that is absolutely okay. That is absolutely okay as a mother. No is a complete sentence. Say it sometimes. Say it sometimes. It's all right. It may make you feel a little uncomfortable in the beginning, but after a while, it'll be okay. It'll be okay. So this is Monday, the second week of January 2023. We have been talking last week about the boundaries that we want to set, the boundaries we need to be setting. This week, we need to talk about setting those boundaries, now implementing those boundaries. When we implement those boundaries, we may have to do it a little bit at a time. And that's all right. Do it a little bit at a time. That way, you'll get into a comfort zone for yourself. You'll get comfortable in saying no. You'll get comfortable with setting those boundaries and implementing those boundaries, whatever they may be. If it's not something that you're used to doing, it's absolutely going to take some time. But let's use this week to practice a little bit here and there. If you normally take your children to school this week, or at least 2 days out this week, say no. Let them catch the bus and let them walk. The weather isn't really bad right now, right? So I say try it out. Try it out. And then maybe next week, do it maybe 3 days. Or if you drop them off and you pick them up, maybe a couple days only drop them off and let them get home, by walking or catching the bus. And then maybe the following week, if you normally drop them off and pick them up, let them catch the bus or walk, and then you pick them up. Flip-flop a little bit. And that way, you're still giving them, right? And you're also setting boundaries for yourself. Maybe you want to go exercise in the morning before you go to work. Maybe you want to take a walk before you go to work. Maybe you want to get an extra cup of coffee at home before you leave to go to work. Or maybe you want to stop by a coffee house or a cafe or something on your way to work to just get something just for you. But you can't normally do that Because in your morning time, you have to go swing by the school to drop the kids off. Just think about it. If that is something that you're able to do, just think about it. And it's not just children. When we're setting boundaries, we have to set boundaries with our spouses, with our parents, with our siblings, with our cousins, just like we need to set boundaries with our kids. Love them all. Absolutely love them all. But anything you do for them, with them, and to them, make sure you're doing it out of love and kindness. Right? Then it won't feel like an obligation. It won't feel like it's a requirement. You'll do it with ease, and it'll all be okay. Sometimes we just have to be still and sit in it before we make a move. And that is absolutely okay. And you should. And you absolutely should. Why? Because you have to put you first. And I know it's early in the morning. I know it's Monday. I know we're getting our week started. But I wanted to say to you, let's start to take baby steps in implementing some of those boundaries that we set last week. Some of those boundaries that we talked about last week. Some of those boundaries that you may tiptoe around, but you want to try. Nothing beats a failure but a try. Right? Because if you don't try, you've already failed. So if you try and failed, at least you tried. And you've learned one way not to do it. Now figure out 10,000 ways to do it. Right? So I'll say to you again, this week, we're going to take baby steps in implementing some of those boundaries that we set last week. And if you had a list of boundaries, let's just start with one. Let's just start with one this week. Everybody receiving it isn't going to like it. Everybody receiving it isn't going to be like, oh, congratulations. You're learning how to say no. You're learning how to set boundaries. You're putting you first. I'm proud of you. If you're looking for that response, you can cancel it. Because that is absolutely not going to happen. Most people that's on the receiving end of you setting your boundaries, of you putting yourself first, and of your no, will not receive it well. Especially the first few times you do it. They're not going to receive it well. But that's totally up to you to continue and persevere through that. Because whether they like it or not, they will respect it. They absolutely will respect it. So happy Monday. I hope that you have a super fantastic day. And I hope that you are taking the time to implement those boundaries, or one of those boundaries, a little bit at a time. A little bit at a time. It'll be just fine. But I'm looking forward to seeing your responses in the comments as you share with me different steps that you're taking to implement those boundaries. Or telling me a situation where you set the boundary last week and you implemented it, and the outcome. The outcome may not be great. The outcome may not be fantastic. The outcome may really become a confrontation, because people don't like to hear no. People don't want to hear you tell them that you can't do, you can't show up, or you can't be there for them. They don't like it. And they don't have to like it. Just respect it. That's all. Just respect it. So I'm so looking forward to seeing what you are doing as far as your boundaries. Because last week we set at least one goal as a boundary. Or I'm sorry, we set at least one boundary as a goal last week. Some of you set more than one boundary as goals, which is awesome. But this week, if you can't do them all, take at least one of those boundaries that you set as a goal and begin to implement that this week. Just using baby steps. And let's see how that turns out. So I look forward to your comments of you sharing with me, Keisha, I set this boundary last week. This week I am implementing it, and this is how it worked. Or this is how it didn't work. Or this was my response when I tried to do it. And then let's walk through it together. We can absolutely walk through it together. So I'm so looking forward to your comments. I'm hoping that you have, set some of those goals or planned out some of those goals on last week. And at least one of them as a boundary. And this week, let's begin to implement those. So my name is Keisha Mason Campbell. I am the author of Not Your Journey to Take, and I teach women that no is a complete sentence, and I show them how to set healthy boundaries with their families, all while putting their needs first. Thank you so much for joining me, and you have a super fantastic Monday. Bye-bye.